The sun blazed mercilessly over Falcon Ridge Wilderness. Ranger Theo Morgan wiped sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the vast landscape. At 45, Theo had devoted over 20 years to protecting this pristine wilderness and the creatures calling it home. This summer had been particularly harsh. Record heat and almost no rain had made finding water difficult for the wildlife. Theo's mission today was to check the remaining waterholes in the remote eastern section of the reserve. Through his binoculars, Theo spotted a small group of wild mustangs gathered around a distant spring. The herd seemed anxious, moving strangely around the water's edge. Something was wrong. Theo mounted his horse, a reliable chestnut gelding named Rusty, and made his way down the rocky path. As he approached, he could see 7 horses led by a strong cream-colored stallion. They paced nervously, occasionally approaching what appeared to be a sinkhole beside the spring. One mare in particular, a beautiful golden-brown horse with distinctive markings, showed extreme distress. She approached the hole repeatedly, pawing at the ground and making high-pitched sounds. "Easy there," Theo murmured, dismounting and securing Rusty to a nearby tree. The wild horses scattered at his approach, all except the golden-brown mare, who stood her ground. Though her ears were pinned back in warning, she refused to leave. When Theo reached the edge of the sinkhole, his heart sank. Below, trapped in a narrow pit about 12 feet deep, was a tiny foal. The little golden-brown colt, no more than a few weeks old, stood trembling in muddy water, his legs stuck in the sucking clay. Theo immediately understood. The drought had caused the water table to drop, creating a dangerous sinkhole at what had once been a safe drinking spot. His radio crackled to life, his supervisor checking in from headquarters. "Found a foal trapped in a sinkhole near the eastern spring," Theo reported. "Going to attempt rescue. Wait for backup," came the immediate response. "That's unstable ground, and the mother will be defensive. Nathan and Luis can be there in about 3 hours." Theo looked at the exhausted foal, then at the darkening sky. A summer thunderstorm was building. If rain came, that hole would fill quickly. "Can't wait that long," Theo replied. "This little guy is fading fast, and there's a storm coming. I'm going in." "Theo, that's against protocol." Theo placed the radio back in its holster. Decision made. Looking toward the golden-brown mare, he spoke as if she could understand. "I'm going to help your baby. Just give me a chance." From his saddlebag, Theo retrieved rope, a collapsible shovel, and his emergency medical kit. The sides of the sinkhole were crumbling and unstable. Working methodically, Theo hammered a metal stake into solid ground, securing his safety line. The wild herd watched from a distance, only the golden-brown mare continuing her vigil nearby. As Theo prepared to descend, the first distant rumble of thunder echoed across the canyon. Time was running out. The sinkhole's edge crumbled beneath Theo's boot as he began his careful descent, sending dirt onto the trapped foal below. The tiny horse flinched, eyes rolling in terror. "It's okay, little one," Theo soothed, though he knew his voice offered little comfort to a wild Mustang. The walls were treacherous, unstable clay mixed with sandstone, slick with moisture from the underground spring. Theo's boots struggled to find purchase as he rappelled down the safety line. From the edge, the golden-brown mare watched with alert ears, her eyes never leaving her trapped foal. The rest of the Mustang herd had retreated further, sensing danger in the approaching storm. When Theo's feet touched the bottom, he found himself knee-deep in muddy water that seemed to be slowly rising. The foal, barely keeping its muzzle above the surface, trembled uncontrollably. "Let's get you out of here," Theo murmured, cautiously approaching the young Mustang. The foal's legs were deeply stuck in the mud, creating a suction that would make freeing him difficult. Additionally, the little Mustang appeared to have an injured front leg. As Theo reached for the foal, the ground beneath them shifted ominously. More water seeped into the pit, and a section of the wall slumped inward. "That's not good," Theo muttered, looking up at the increasingly unstable edges. Above, the golden-brown mare whinnied anxiously, pacing faster as she sensed the escalating danger. Thunder rumbled again, closer this time. Theo knew he had minutes, not hours, before the storm would hit. Working quickly but cautiously, he looped a soft rescue sling under the foal's belly. The young Mustang flinched but was too exhausted to fight. Carefully, Theo began to free each of the foal's legs from the sucking mud, his own boots sinking deeper in the process. The water level continued to rise steadily, now nearly at the foal's chest. Just as Theo freed the last hoof, a deafening crack of thunder directly overhead caused the foal to jerk in terror. The sudden movement destabilized the wall beside them, sending a cascade of mud and rock into the pit. Theo instinctively threw himself over the foal, protecting the tiny body as debris showered down. A sharp pain lanced through his left shoulder as a falling rock struck him. The safety line, their only way out, was now partially buried. Blood trickled down Theo's arm inside his uniform shirt. The water level had risen another inch in just the last few minutes. Looking up, Theo could see the mare still pacing the edge, her distress evident in every movement. Behind her, the sky turned an ominous greenish-black. "We need to move now," Theo said, fighting to keep his voice calm despite the throbbing pain in his shoulder. Digging the safety line out from the debris with his good arm, Theo secured the rescue sling properly around the foal. The young Mustang stood surprisingly still, enormous eyes fixed on Theo. "That's it, little guy. Work with me here," Theo encouraged, giving the rope 3 sharp tugs, the signal for an emergency extraction. But the line remained slack. With growing dread, Theo realized the stake must have come loose in the unstable ground above. Their only escape route was compromised. As if understanding their dire situation, the foal let out a pitiful whimper, pressing against Theo's legs in a heartbreaking display of trust. Water now swirled around their knees, rising faster as the first heavy raindrops began to fall above. Theo looked up at the increasingly unstable rim, calculating their chances. Just as he prepared to attempt the climb, a shadow fell across the pit. Looking up, he saw something that defied all his knowledge of wild horse behavior. The golden-brown mare had returned to the very edge, her head lowered toward them, eyes locked with Theo's in what could only be described as a deliberate communication. The first sheets of rain slashed across the canyon as Theo stared up at the mare. Water streamed down her neck as she pawed at the edge of the sinkhole, her eyes never leaving Theo's face. "Back up, girl," Theo called, concerned her weight would collapse more of the unstable edge. Instead of retreating, the mare stretched her neck down toward them, nickering insistently. The meaning was unmistakable. She was offering help. In 22 years of working with wildlife, Theo had never seen anything like this. Wild Mustangs, especially mares with foals, avoided human contact at all costs. Yet here was this mother deliberately engaging with a human to save her baby. The water continued to rise, now reaching mid-thigh on Theo and threatening to submerge the exhausted foal. Time had run out for careful deliberation. "Okay, girl, let's try this together," Theo murmured, making a decision that went against all his training. Gathering the weakened foal in his arms, ignoring the pain that shot through his injured shoulder, Theo positioned himself directly below the mare. The foal was heavier than expected, perhaps 50 pounds of trembling, wet muscle. With a silent prayer, Theo lifted the foal as high as his strength would allow. "Take him," he urged the mare. For one breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, in a display of precision that seemed impossible for a wild animal, the mare gently grasped the loose skin at the back of her foal's neck, the same way she would have carried him as a newborn. The foal instinctively went limp, triggering an ancient genetic response. With remarkable strength, the mare began to pull her baby upward, while Theo supported the foal's weight from below. "That's it," Theo encouraged, as inches of progress became a foot, then 2. When the foal's body was more than halfway out, Theo gave one final push with his good arm, propelling the young Mustang onto solid ground beside his mother. A moment of profound connection passed between the human ranger and the wild mare as she momentarily met his gaze, her foal safely beside her. Then she turned her attention to her baby, vigorously nuzzling and inspecting him for injuries. Theo allowed himself a moment of relief before confronting his own situation. The storm was now in full force, water pouring into the pit at an alarming rate. His injured shoulder greatly reduced his climbing ability, and the walls were becoming more unstable by the second. Theo's radio had been damaged in the earlier rockfall. He was truly on his own. As the water reached his waist, he attempted to climb, driving his boot into the slippery wall and pushing upward. He gained perhaps 2 feet before the mud gave way, plunging him back into the rising water. After 2 more failed attempts, Theo faced the grim reality of his situation. The water continued to rise steadily. A movement at the edge caught his attention. Against all expectations, the golden-brown mare had returned, leaving her foal a safe distance away. She pawed at the ground again, this time dislodging a cascade of earth that seemed to create a crude ramp along one side of the pit. With the water now at his chest, Theo moved toward the area where the mare continued to paw and push at the earth. The collapsed section did indeed form a rough, sloping surface that might allow him to climb out. As Theo began his ascent, the mare did something even more extraordinary. She lowered her head toward him, extending her neck as if offering something to grasp. "You can't be serious," Theo murmured. But the mare remained steadfast. In a moment that defied everything Theo thought he knew about wild animals, he reached up and gently took hold of the mare's mane. She stood firm, muscles braced, as Theo used the handhold to pull himself further up the crude ramp. When he slipped, she compensated, leaning in to give him better leverage. When the edge began to crumble beneath him, she backed up, pulling him the final distance to safety. Theo collapsed on solid ground just as another section of the pit gave way completely. Had he remained inside even a minute longer, he would have been buried alive. 2 weeks after the incident at Falcon Ridge, Theo sat in the medical office at Ranger headquarters as Dr. Layla Patel examined his healing shoulder. "You're lucky it was just a deep bruise and not a fracture," she said, testing his range of motion. "Another week and you should be cleared for full duty." Theo nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Since that day in the sinkhole, he had been unable to stop thinking about the golden-brown mare and what she had done. "Something on your mind, Morgan?" Dr. Patel asked, noticing his distraction. Theo hesitated. He had filed his official report about the rescue of the foal but had deliberately omitted certain details, specifically how he himself had escaped the collapsed pit. Some things were too extraordinary to commit to paper. "Just wondering about those Mustangs," he said casually. "Thought I might check on them when I get back out there." Dr. Patel smiled. "The ones you're not supposed to get emotionally attached to because they're wild animals?" "Something like that," Theo admitted. After being cleared, Theo made his way to the office of Park Superintendent Sophia Reyes. If he wanted to monitor the Mustang herd, particularly the golden-brown mare and her foal, he would need to adjust his patrol route. Sophia listened to his request with a raised eyebrow. "This wouldn't have anything to do with that incident report you filed, would it? The one that was surprisingly vague about how you got yourself out of that sinkhole?" Theo met her gaze steadily. "Just want to make sure the foal's doing okay." "Aha," Sophia replied, unconvinced. "Well, we do need updated population counts on the herds in that sector. I suppose I could reassign you there for the next few weeks." "I appreciate it," Theo said, rising to leave. "Morgan," Sophia called as he reached the door. "Whatever really happened out there? Sometimes there are things about these animals we can't explain in reports." Theo paused, surprised by her comment. Speaking from experience? A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Let's just say you're not the first ranger to have an unusual encounter in this wilderness. Some stories stay in the field." 3 days later, Theo was back on patrol in the eastern sector. The recent rain had transformed the landscape, bringing a flush of green to the normally dry terrain. New water holes glistened in the sunlight, and wildflowers dotted the hillsides. Theo rode Rusty along a ridgeline that offered a panoramic view of the canyon below. For hours there was no sign of the Mustangs, which wasn't surprising. Wild horses roamed widely, especially after rain created new grazing opportunities. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Theo was about to turn back when he spotted movement near a grove of cottonwood trees. Adjusting his binoculars, he focused on a small band of horses emerging from the shade. His heart quickened as he recognized the cream-colored stallion leading the group. Behind him came several mares and, Theo held his breath, the golden-brown mare with her foal trotting beside her. The young colt still favored his injured leg slightly but moved with growing strength. Theo watched them for nearly an hour, documenting their movements while maintaining a respectful distance. As the herd moved toward a nearby spring, something unexpected happened. The golden-brown mare suddenly raised her head, nostrils flaring as she tested the wind. Then, with deliberate purpose, she looked directly up at Theo's position on the ridge. It should have been impossible for her to spot him at that distance. Yet Theo had the uncanny feeling she knew exactly where he was. For a long moment, horse and human regarded each other across the expanse, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Then, as if making a decision, the mare began to walk in his direction, her foal following close behind. Theo remained motionless as the golden-brown mare and her foal separated from the herd and began climbing the slope toward his position. The cream-colored stallion watched but made no move to stop them, unusual behavior for a herd leader. "Easy now," Theo whispered, though he knew they couldn't hear him at this distance. He dismounted from Rusty, ground-tying the gelding who watched the approaching wild horses with pricked ears. Theo crouched low, making himself less threatening while maintaining a clear view of the pair's ascent. When they reached a flat area about 50 yards from Theo's position, the mare stopped. The foal, displaying remarkable trust, continued forward a few more steps before his mother nickered softly, calling him back to her side. Theo held his breath. No wild Mustang would willingly approach a human this way, especially not with a vulnerable foal. Yet here they were, deliberately seeking him out. Slowly, Theo stood. The mare watched intently but showed no sign of fear. Taking an enormous risk, Theo spoke softly. "Hello again, girl." The mare's ears flicked forward at the sound of his voice. For several minutes they remained in this standoff, wild horses and human ranger, connected by an experience that defied natural boundaries. Then, with deliberate slowness, Theo reached into his saddlebag and removed an apple he'd brought for his own lunch. He held it in his open palm, then placed it on a flat rock midway between them. The mare watched his movements with intelligent assessment. After a moment's consideration, she approached the offering, her steps measured but not fearful. Her foal stayed close behind, limping slightly but moving with growing confidence. When she reached the apple, the mare sniffed it carefully before taking it in her teeth. Instead of retreating to eat it, she remained near the rock, crunching the fruit while maintaining eye contact with Theo. "You're welcome," Theo said softly. The foal, emboldened by his mother's calm, took a curious step toward Theo. The sight of the young Mustang's tentative approach brought a lump to Theo's throat. This was the tiny life he'd risked everything to save, now thriving despite his injury. Theo knew he should maintain his distance. These were wild animals that needed to remain wild. Yet something profound had happened between them in that sinkhole, something that transcended the natural boundaries between their species. The interaction lasted perhaps 20 minutes. The mare allowed her foal to explore within a certain radius of Theo's position, though she maintained a watchful presence. Theo remained still, speaking occasionally in soft tones that seemed to reassure rather than frighten them. As the sun began to set, the cream-colored stallion called from below. The mare responded with a soft nicker of her own, then turned to leave. Before departing, she did something remarkable. She took 3 deliberate steps toward Theo, closer than she'd been since the rescue, and lowered her head slightly, almost like a nod of acknowledgement. Then she was gone, leading her foal back down the slope to rejoin their herd. Theo watched until they disappeared into the growing shadows. His hands were shaking slightly as he mounted Rusty for the ride back to headquarters. Over the following weeks, these encounters continued. The mare and foal would seek Theo out whenever he patrolled their territory, maintaining a careful distance but clearly recognizing him. Sometimes the entire herd would graze peacefully nearby while Theo documented their behavior, the barriers of fear dissolving into a cautious coexistence. The young colt's leg healed completely, and he grew stronger each day. His playful antics brought an unexpected joy to Theo's solitary patrols. Theo knew these moments were precious and rare, a glimpse into a relationship between species that few would ever experience. What he didn't know was that these encounters were about to take on far greater significance than he could have imagined. Summer faded into autumn, painting Falcon Ridge in rich golds and reds. Theo's unusual connection with the golden-brown mare and her colt had become the highlight of his patrols, though he kept these interactions largely to himself, documenting them in a private journal rather than official reports. One crisp October morning, Theo arrived at headquarters to find an unfamiliar collection of vehicles in the parking area. 3 black SUVs with government plates and a large truck loaded with metal panels. "What's going on?" he asked Elijah, a fellow ranger exiting the main building. Elijah lowered his voice. Land management officials, something about an emergency gather operation. Theo's stomach tightened. Gather was the official term for Mustang roundups, where helicopters drove wild horses into traps for removal from public lands. Inside, he found Sophia Reyes in tense conversation with a man in a pressed shirt and tie. Theo recognized Vincent Hayes, the regional land management coordinator. "Theo," Sophia said, spotting him. Mr. Hayes was just explaining their plans for an emergency gather in the eastern sector. Emergency? Theo questioned. The herds are stable. Water sources have recovered since the rain. There's no justification for emergency action. Hayes straightened. We've received reports of diseased horses in that region. We need to remove them before it spreads to other herds or livestock. Diseased? Theo challenged. I patrol that area weekly. Those horses are healthy. Nevertheless, Hayes continued smoothly, the operation begins tomorrow. Helicopters at dawn, traps in the eastern canyon. We expect to remove approximately 30 head. Theo's mind raced. The eastern canyon was home to the cream-colored stallions herd, including the golden brown mare and her colt. Superintendent, Theo appealed to Sophia, at least delay this until we can conduct a proper health assessment. My hands are tied, Morgan, Sophia replied, though her expression conveyed her own displeasure. The authorization comes from the regional director. After Hayes departed, Sophia pulled Theo aside. Something doesn't add up. The Whitewater Ranch expanded their grazing lease last month. Their new boundary puts them right up against prime Mustang territory. Theo understood the implication. Private interests often influenced Mustang removals, creating more land for cattle under the guise of environmental management. I need to warn them, Theo said quietly. Sophia pretended not to hear, turning away as she added, I'll be in meetings all afternoon. Won't notice if someone's patrol runs long today. Theo didn't waste time. Within 30 minutes, he and Rusty were galloping toward the eastern canyon. If the Mustangs remained in their current location, they would be directly in the path of tomorrow's roundup. He pushed Rusty harder than usual, covering ground rapidly. At the ridge overlook, Theo scanned the canyon below but found no sign of the herd in their usual grazing areas. Descending into the canyon, Theo followed game trails that wound through the underbrush. After nearly 2 hours of searching, he spotted fresh hoof prints leading toward a secluded box canyon rarely used by the herds. As he rounded the final bend, Theo found them. The entire herd was gathered near a small spring, the cream-colored stallion standing alert at the entrance to the canyon. The moment Theo appeared, the stallion issued a warning snort, causing several mares to bunch protectively around their foals. Only the golden brown mare showed no fear, stepping forward at the sight of Theo with her colt close behind. The young Mustang had grown considerably, his coat beginning to take on the golden brown coloration that matched his mother's. Dismounting, Theo approached slowly. Hey girl, he called softly. You're all in danger. The mare watched him intently, as if understanding the urgency in his voice. Theo knew what he was about to do violated every regulation. Directly interfering with wild horse movement was strictly prohibited, but he couldn't stand by while these animals were captured. You need to move, he told them, gesturing to the ridge beyond. By morning, this entire canyon will be a trap. Taking a risk, Theo began walking deeper into the canyon, then turned and clapped his hands loudly. The cream-colored stallion reared in alarm, other horses shifting nervously. Only the golden brown mare held her ground, her intelligent eyes fixed on Theo as he continued his attempt to drive them toward the canyon's rear exit. Then something extraordinary happened. The mare turned and approached the stallion, nickering softly. The two horses stood nose to nose for a moment in what appeared to be communication. Then the stallion threw his head up and issued a commanding whinny. To Theo's amazement, the herd began to move as one, following the stallion toward the hidden trail that led out the canyon's back entrance, away from tomorrow's planned gather site. Dawn broke with a distant thrum of helicopter blades echoing through Falcon Ridge. Theo stood on a high ridge, binoculars trained on the eastern slopes where land management contractors had established their trap. Metal corrals connected to long, funnel-shaped fencing designed to channel frightened horses into captivity. His heart raced as he scanned the surrounding terrain. Had the herd escaped in time, or would the helicopter drive them into the waiting trap? Hours passed as the helicopter made sweeping passes over the canyon. To everyone's surprise, no Mustangs appeared. By mid-afternoon, the frustrated pilot landed to refuel, and Theo overheard radio chatter about the inexplicable absence of horses in a usually populated area. Relief flooded through him, though he maintained a neutral expression as Hayes approached. "Strange," Hayes said, suspicion evident in his tone. "Your reports indicated multiple bands in this region." Theo shrugged. "Wild horses move. That's why they're called wild." The operation continued for 2 more days with minimal success. Of nearly 80 horses expected to be captured, only 7 were found, none from the cream-colored stallions herd. Eventually, Hayes canceled the remainder of the gather, citing unusual migration patterns in his report. A week later, Theo rode into the high country where few patrols ventured. Following instinct more than tracking signs, he moved deeper into the wilderness until he reached a secluded valley he discovered years earlier. There, grazing peacefully in the autumn sunlight, was the cream-colored stallions herd. They had traveled nearly 20 miles from their usual range, finding safety in the remote highlands. As Theo watched from a distance, a familiar figure detached from the group. The golden-brown mare, her coat glowing copper in the sunlight, approached with her now gangly colt beside her. They stopped a respectful distance away, the mare's intelligent eyes meeting Theo's in silent acknowledgement. "You made it," Theo said softly. "Smart girl." Something had changed in their relationship since the sinkhole rescue. A bond of trust and understanding that defied explanation. This wasn't just an animal responding to human kindness. This was something deeper, a recognition between 2 intelligent species. Over the following months, Theo made discreet changes to his patrol reports, carefully omitting certain valleys and canyons from his Mustang census. The cream-colored stallions herd remained in the remote highlands, protected by Theo's deliberate inaccuracies and their own growing understanding of human threats. Sophia never questioned his reports, though occasionally she would give him a knowing look when land management officials expressed confusion about the declining Mustang population in previously documented areas. Spring arrived, bringing new foals to the herd. During one of his visits, Theo watched as the golden-brown mare approached with not 1 but 2 youngsters, her now yearling colt and a new filly just weeks old. To Theo's amazement, she brought them within 30 feet of where he sat, closer than ever before. The yearling, remembering Theo from his earliest days, showed no fear. The tiny filly hid behind her mother, peeking curiously at the strange human. "Introducing me to your new little one?" Theo asked softly. The mare lowered her head slightly, then raised it again, the same nodding gesture she had shown him that day at the sinkhole. Theo had come to recognize it as her way of communicating agreement. As the years passed, Theo became the unofficial guardian of the Mustang herds in Falcon Ridge. His reports helped establish a wildlife corridor that protected critical habitat, while his quiet advocacy influenced policy changes that reduced gather operations throughout the region. The golden-brown mare and her growing family remained free, wild as they were meant to be, yet connected to the human ranger in a relationship that defied classification. Her yearling colt eventually formed his own band, while her filly grew into a mirror image of her mother, intelligent, curious, and unafraid. On the eve of Theo's retirement, he rode one last time to the high valley. There, as if expecting him, waited the golden-brown mare. Older now, with touches of gray on her muzzle, she still moved with the same grace and purpose. As sunset painted the canyon in gold, horse and human shared a final moment of connection. 2 beings from different worlds, united by an act of courage and compassion that had changed both their lives forever.